Our next guest is a former professional snowboarder who channeled his love of extreme sports into fearless filmmaking that aims to change the world. His latest documentary has already won multiple international awards and chronicles the plight of the people and wildlife of Virunga National Forest. Deep in the forest of the eastern Congo, Virunga is home to the world's only remaining mountain gorillas and a small but courageous team of park rangers determined to preserve their safety and habitat. Take a look.
My work is to manage the park to ensure that it's protected. Any oil-related activities are illegal.
All the armed groups will want their slice of the cake.
I think they're playing with fire.
It's the money that fuels everything. Blame God.
This isn't a war yet, but it could be soon.
Ça va barder ici.
The danger is near us.
The Congolese army is fleeing.
M23, ils sont là.
Fear has driven people out of these villages into farmland.
The park itself is the only hope this region has. It's intense.
You must justify why you are on this earth.
Finalement, nous serons aussi jugés. Nous allons seulement croiser le bras quand le parc sera en train de disparaître.
Pourtant, notre souhait est que ce parc reste immortel.
Despite the fact that Virunga is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, its rich natural resources have been under siege by armed militia, poachers, and even a European oil company. Here to tell us about this beautiful and vulnerable region, his film, and update us on Virunga today, please welcome Orlando Von Einsiedel. Einsiedel?
Close enough. Yes.
Yeah, we worked on it several times. But, okay, snowboarder to filmmaker, not a usual transition. How did that come to be?
It's a weird thing. I think when you're snowboarding, you get, the way you make money is through sponsorship. And so I had my sponsors, and then you can get extra money for every time you're in a magazine or a video. So there's an incentive for you and your friends to all learn how to film each other, take photographs of each other, and I guess I learned my craft. I learned how to make snowboard movies, and then, you know, one day decided I wanted to try and make other films, and that kind of led into promos and commercials, and then into documentary, which is what I'm doing now.
And this film is interesting in that I always say when you're in the news business that one of the worst things is preconceived notion news. You go into a story and you say, this is what the story is, and then you become married to it, and the best thing you can do is get a divorce because there's a better story there. And that's exactly what happened with you.
Yeah, so I set out to try and make a positive film from Eastern Congo. I work a lot in West Africa, and I've been wanting to make a film in Congo for a long time, but I wanted to try and tell a story that wasn't the usual stories that you normally hear from the region, which tend to be about conflict, sexual violence. I mean those are really important stories to tell, but I wanted to try and tell a different narrative. And I came across this story of Virunga's rangers risking their lives to protect mountain gorillas, and these really amazing development projects which this park was doing to try and transform the region, create jobs, create economic stability and peace. And that appealed to me, this kind of transformative story. So I went out to start documenting that, and I'd only been on the ground about a couple of weeks when this new civil war started. And at the same time, I learned about the park's very serious concerns about a British oil company and its illegal exploration for oil. So almost overnight, the film took this kind of U-turn, and I began making something very different. It's a fantastic film, but I want to talk to you about the first 11 minutes, because I think it's critical how you put it together, and brilliant, because at the beginning, it starts with a funeral. And you see the emotions of it all. And then you introduce us to these gorillas, and they're so sweet and so loving and so wonderful. And about 11 minutes in, there's another funeral. And it's a funeral for one of the gorillas. And you completely understand why, and you understand why they're so special. And then this threat that develops. I mean, you're sold, you're hooked. How important was it to juxtapose those two? Well, I mean, you know, the people living in the region, they've lived with the gorillas for forever, and they're almost like family. And when something happens to them, you know, it's treated like members of the family have been killed. And also they, you know, people know how important these gorillas are, not just because they're the last of them, but because they represent a positive, hopeful future. Because, you know, next door in Rwanda, gorilla tourism alone brings in $430 million a year, which is an enormous amount of money. And Virunga has that potential to bring in just as much, because it's even bigger, it's even more spectacular. So you know, there's also a very practical reason why people care about these gorillas, because they offer a chance out of the resource curse and conflict which Congo's faced for so long.
You said family. Why don't you set up this next clip? Because we meet these caretakers who say that, you know, I have my family at home, but this is my other family, and it's illustrated through your pictures. Set this up for us, will you?
So this is a clip with Andre Baumer talking. He's one of Virunga's. He looks after orphan baby mountain gorillas. There's only a couple of people in the entire world of his job. He's one of the bravest, most honourable men I've ever met, and this is him talking about the gorillas.
Dans le monde entier, c'est dans cette entité-là où vous pouvez encore trouver les gorilles des montagnes. Il y a seulement environ 800 qui restent sur toute l'étendue de la planète Terre. Maintenant, si nous les perdons, nous aurons perdu vraiment quelque chose de très important pour l'humanité.
So, what's interesting is just now we saw the animals, we see the beauty, we know what this park's all about. But there's another story that's starting to develop, a much darker story. The rebels encroaching, Congolese forces retreating. One of the guys says on camera, we're between the anvil and the hammer, and that's what you're witnessing next.
So yeah, tragically, during a period when I was there, this new civil war started. This rebel group called the M23 started to take over a lot of land. They sort of based themselves within the park because they can hide in the forests. And there was one particular period where they took over the park's headquarters. For me, as a filmmaker, I mean, I was frankly completely terrified, but I'd always draw strength from how brave the Rangers were in the face of everything. So, you know, if I'd ever get scared, they'd say, pull yourself up, stop being such a wimp. And this next clip is just as the rebels are about to arrive.
Les villageois sont en train de fuir.
Nous on reste ici. Oui. Je voulais juste savoir, pour la nourriture, pour les gorilles, on a combien de jours devant nous?
2 jours comme ça.
Les M23 sont à Roubaré, ok? S'ils ferment Moiro, ok? Oui. Nous on va devoir se débrouiller ici.
Ninatafuta njaita majina ya batu. Mwenye anasikia jina yake na batoto yake anapita pembeni na bitu yake mimi naiona.
So the tension's building, the people are leaving. How often were you saying, you know, I could pack up my stuff and get out of here? I mean, it must have gone through your mind at least once or twice.
Oh, a lot more than once or twice. I mean, in that particular clip, just a little bit later, everyone leaves. A lot of the villagers and the families of the rangers, they left to a safer location. And Emmanuel Demerode, who was the park's director, he said to me, do you want to go with them? You know, now's the last chance. Do you want to go? And every part of my body was like, yes, I really want to go. For whatever reason, I decided to stay.
On a scale of 1 to 10, obviously an 11 in terms of scary, how scary did it get?
I mean, you know, it was a very, very scary time. I mean, you know, the front line came over where we were a couple of times, and when that happens, there's just incredible violence. You know, I was very scared and very stressed for a long period, but as I was saying, you know, I'd always just draw strength from the rangers because they are way braver than I would ever be, and they've been living through this sort of thing for the last 20 years. You know, over the last 20 years, 140 of them have died protecting the park, and they do that. They get up every day to risk their lives doing that because they know the potential that Virunga National Park has to transform the region for the better, and that you draw real courage and strength from other people's bravery.
The other thing that I think you capture that I don't think I've ever seen in a film before is the stress and the effect war has, not just on people, but the gorillas show it as well. Were you kind of surprised at that?
I was. I mean, you know, it was such a stressful time. It would have been almost weird if they hadn't picked up on it. I mean, every day the bombs were getting closer and closer until, you know, in the end, it was, you know, you'd feel the vibrations from them because they were so close. And, you know, and naturally the gorillas were getting more and more panicked. I mean, it wasn't just the gorillas. The monkeys in the trees were, the birds were flying around. And, I mean, the stress got so much in the end that one of the gorillas got really sick from it. And
getting the Soco story wasn't easy. You went undercover. Talk to us about that effort.
So when I got there and I learned about this story, I learned that the park was already doing its own investigation into what they believed were illegal acts. I learned that a lot of fishermen living around the lake where Soco's doing its exploration, they were very concerned. They'd been documenting what happened. And my background as a journalistic filmmaker, I've made a lot of investigations. So what I brought with me was a load of undercover filming cameras. And so we started to give those to various people who were already looking into this, and we started to document what was happening, and we started to come across, you know, very concerning things. So, you know, one of Soco's supporters and an army officer who works with Soco on the ground, he started offering money to one of the park rangers to work against the park and to tell him about what the boss of Virunga was doing. And, you know, and in the end it amounted to a dossier of evidence which has, you know, shows that this company has a serious lack of oversight about its operations on the ground, and suggests concerns about links between Soco's supporters and contractors with ties to armed groups or bribery and corruption and human rights abuses.
Let's watch one of the clips, some of the undercover investigation that you did, and let's talk about that after.
Sure.
Now we see the value of that park. It's just a mind.
Could be corrupted.
The geology.
It is corrupted.
Money is pulled out. And now what they defend, I'm not sure it's all the animals. I'm not sure at all.
Especially being there and witnessing these animals and just how special they are, to see him say that, ooh, that's a spear through the heart, isn't it?
It is. I mean, when when we first started looking at that stuff, I mean, that gentleman saying that was Soco's main employee on the ground in Eastern Congo, and I mean, that's the sort of thing you hear in a movie. You know, it's almost, you couldn't script it, and then just to hear that coming out of his mouth, I mean, we were completely shocked. And it goes just to get completely against everything which Soco say publicly. You know, they say, we really care about the gorillas, we really care about this park, and if their own employees are talking like that, I mean, you can make up your own mind.
You've done your part, you've made the film, but viewers watching this, or viewers who see the film, what can they do?
There's a couple of very simple things we're asking people to do. One of the first is to sign up to our website. It's virungamovie.com, and then we send out a newsletter which explains various different things that they can do as we go forward. We want people to spread the word, to go on social media and spread the word about the film and what's happening in it. And lastly, we'd like people to donate directly to the park, and you can do that through the park's own website. It's virunga.org/donate, and you can choose exactly where your money goes. You can support gorilla conservation, or you can support a fund for the widows of the 140 rangers who've been killed.
We've only talked about two pieces in this triple threat. Can you talk to us about poachers? What is that threat?
The poaching threat is, you know, it's very real, and you know, it's tied to poverty. You know, people, there's a lack of jobs in the region, and you know, that's poaching tends to happen when there is poverty. It's also a threat which is being managed by the park, and it has been reduced. And you know, poaching of gorillas has fallen dramatically in the last 5 years. The one threat which actually threatens the entire integrity of the park, though, is the illegal oil exploration.
I noticed when we were showing the trailer, you kind of look down like this, and it's almost, and maybe I'm reading something into this that isn't there, and you tell me if that's the case, but I feel as though there's almost a burden, a responsibility that you feel. You know, you've captured this story, you left, these people remain. It's so important to get this story out. Is there an enormous burden with this? I mean, what do you carry with you about telling this story?
It's only a burden I want to carry. I mean, I care deeply about this park. I care deeply about the rangers and the people I worked with. I believe that the contribution that I can make as a filmmaker is to share the story which I documented, their story, and to share that with the world. And maybe I could just add, and this is a story which I do believe is relevant to everyone. This isn't just about, protecting Virunga isn't just about protecting a very, one of the most biodiverse spots in the world, home to the last mountain gorillas, a real hope for economic development in the region. Protecting Virunga, it's what's going on there is really a precedent-setting case. Virunga's a World Heritage Site, and only a tiny portion of our planet has been designated these incredibly important areas that need to be protected. Humanity has decided that we should not explore for oil there, we should not drill for coal. They're so important. And if somewhere as iconic as Virunga National Park, Africa's oldest national park, falls in the face of illegal oil exploration, if that place falls, what can be protected from human greed?
Good question. We'll leave it there. Orlando, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you very much, Mike.
Coming up next, this week's Full Frame Close-Up.